In this episode, I'm going to be talking about photo bashing and photo texturing. Stay tuned. Hello guys, welcome to this week's episode. My name is Jose Vega. I'm a concept artist at josevega.com, and in this channel I like to share with you guys my tips and tricks for Photoshop in digital painting. And in this week's episode, I'm going to be showing you how to use your reference pictures and your photos to photo bash in your paintings. Let's check it out. Okay guys, so before I start talking about photo bashing and photo texturing, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about referencing and setting up my scene uh, before I start doing any work. Now, for my reference, I went ahead to environment slash textures.com here, and this is a great website for finding references and photo textures and all that. And once you subscribe and pay for your credits and all that, you're gonna see here all your different options that you can find pictures from. And let's say I want to find some decals here, I can come here and have all these options of things that I can use in my scene that will help me create my image. I already did all this process, and I just want to talk a little bit about all the steps so you guys have a little bit of information of how I got to where I'm gonna start, and that way you guys don't feel too lost. So once I find my reference, I went ahead, for example, I already had an idea, and for example, it's gonna be a little bit more industrial type scene, and I wanted to find pixels like this. And if you don't know how to look for a reference or anything like that, or you want to know a little bit more about that, I have an episode about what I think when I'm looking up for references and how I think about it and the tools that I use. So you can check that video out and have a little bit more info. But I look for images like this, and you know, all these images of industrial designs are great, and buildings like derelict buildings and all that, because that's what my image is gonna be about. So I already have a bunch of pictures that are already downloaded. You can see them here. and then I went ahead and did my reference sheet. So my reference sheet is just to help me guide me on my process. And you're gonna see here a bunch of pictures here, and things that are gonna help me keep my image true to the idea that I had. All right. So once I do that, again on my episode I show you how do I think, or what I think about when I'm creating my reference sheet. And you're gonna see here that I already made up a model. This is a basic model I did in Maya. And what I like to do is that if I have the time, most of the time when I'm working personal pieces, or if I have plenty of time for client work, I like to do a 3D model and actually like to put textures on it. Now the textures, you're gonna notice that they're not perfect placed on my model, right? They're just thrown in there, and you know, the scale is not really true, and you're gonna see that, you know, it's not perfect. So it really doesn't matter at this point to me, because what I want is just to have an idea of what the texture is gonna be like at that spot, and just to give me some base for me to work on, because most of the work of my texture work and all that is gonna be done by the photo bashing or photo texturing techniques. Now I do want to have a more clear and set lighting that I want for my scene. So the lighting that you're gonna see here is probably the lighting you're gonna see at the end of the image. So I do not want to change too much of the lighting, but that's also going to depend how the image is going to progress. But what I like to do is that once I have my references here, I like to use some of these pictures that I already have as reference and use them as textures on my scene. So that way I'm starting to make the scene feel the way that I want it to feel. And you're going to notice here that, for example, this texture here, I use this image here on this side, and some of these textures are just regular rock textures, or just a colored texture for the sand, or metal, or anything like that. So this just gives me a good base for me to work on and start doing all my techniques, or photo bashing techniques. Okay, so once I have this, I can bring this in Photoshop, and then I can start bringing my pictures that I'm gonna be using for my photo bashing. Now I'm gonna be showing you guys 3 different techniques that I use for photo bashing, and photo bashing for me is a lot of times very experimental. So sometimes I try one technique with one image on my scene here, and it doesn't work, so I gotta try another technique, and then I try my other technique and see what works and what doesn't work. And sometimes I already know which technique is gonna work, but sometimes have to experiment and see what I can get from each of the techniques. And maybe you get a happy accident that you might like, that works in your image, so you keep that and you just continue working it. So a lot of times you're gonna see that I bring a picture and I try different things and it doesn't work, and I erase it and I bring another picture, and it's just I continue back and forth working my image. Okay, so let's start with the first technique. Now what I want to do is I want to show you the techniques first, and without doing too much, because I want to explain the technique and the way I incorporate the images here, and then I can start working on the image and using all these techniques. That way, the experimental part is out of the way, and you guys don't get bored by it. So so let's get started with the first technique. So let's start with the easiest technique, and I brought a picture here of the sand. Now I do want, my idea was it's gonna be like a very derelict, abandoned type of industrial environment, and it's gonna be like a very white, light sand, and like a desert or beach probably. So I brought this picture of sand, and what I want from this picture mostly is this pattern of the sands here, and this really nice light and shadow ideas of the pattern and texture of the sand. That's what I'm gonna try to bring into my scene here. So the first technique that I want to tell you guys is using the layer blending modes. Layer blending modes, you can find them here on the top section of your layer window. And you have all these options here, and again, this is a very experimental part, but most of the times there are some layer blending modes that are gonna work most of the time, like for example overlay or multiply or sometimes color. So what I like to do, besides, instead of going straight on to one of those, I'll go to normal here, and I'm gonna use my arrow key, and so I'm gonna place this somewhere here. I just wanna affect that bottom floor area, and I'm just gonna, with my drop down menu here and my arrow keys on my keyboard, just gonna go down on the menu here, and you can see that I can go pretty fast and kind of see which one could work. If I get something that I could use, I can stop and see. So that's overlay, so I know that's gonna work very nice here, but I still wanna experiment with others and see if I get like a happy accident or something that might work. So I still get kind of like similar effect to a lot of these blending modes. So either multiplying works pretty good in terms of the texture, but it makes my sand too dark, and I don't want to be too dark. I want it to contrast my building, my dark buildings. I'm just gonna go with overlay here, and I'm gonna place this here, and I'm gonna tilt it a little bit, and I really like that white sand here, something that I want to keep and maintain. I'm not too worried about the yellowish color here, because I can grab layer here saturation, bring that down to almost no saturation, and have it like really white instead of yellowish. But what I like to is all these sections here that I can use from this picture and have that on my scene. So now once I place that, I can put a mask on it, on my layer, and by putting a mask I can click this button here on the bottom, and that's gonna create like a secondary, like a sub layer next to that one. And what that does is it's gonna use opacity to reveal what's on my normal layer here. So you can see that I can toggle and click and select either the layer, the actual layer, or the mask. So when you see the mask, that is, you can see that it's pure white, all white. That means that there is no opacity to my layer here. So my masks work from black to white, my gradients. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start painting black with a very soft brush and very light, just so I can eliminate the parts that I don't want to affect on my scene. So all this part right here, I don't really need. So I'm just gonna paint. You're gonna see here on my mask that you can see black already. That means that there's full opacity there. And I just want some of these areas here. I can toggle on and off and see how that image affects. So I still have some here. And I'm getting this very ambient blue here. And I actually want to keep that, so I can use that later to push things back and forth. I kind of have that hazy look, like maybe the wind is blowing up sand, so you get very hazy look in the background. But let's see some parts here. That's pretty good. I'm gonna eliminate some of this on the rock here. It doesn't have to be perfect because I'm actually gonna paint over this. So like all the sand, I'm gonna bring some of the sand on top of the buildings and some of the parts of the buildings and all that. And I'm gonna be using color picking from here to do that. So I'm not worried to be too perfect. But you can see how that gives it a very nice texture here, instead of being almost flat. It gives it a really nice texture, and it looks more believable, that sand. Now examples here, like this part here, it looks very geometric and 3D like, so I'm gonna paint over that to make it look more realistic and painterly. That's the first technique, using layer blending modes. Now that sometimes, again, it doesn't work all the time, but sometimes it does, like this example here. Now the other technique that I want to show you guys is using the layer properties. Now I have this image here, and with this technique you have to almost make sure that your lighting in your reference image and your lighting in your scene are the same, and also the perspective of it, and that's super important. And I'll show you guys why now. So for example, I want this element here of this structure here, and maybe there's a little bit of this and that, and I want to kind of place it on top here, so I can break up this very long line. And this is a great picture for this technique because I have the structure that I want on a really dark value, and then the background is very light, so I can see a really nice separation of those two elements, and that's actually gonna be helpful with this technique. So by doing this is, if I double click my layer out here, I'm gonna double click it, I get this window, and here you can see that you got drop shadows and glows and all this stuff. We're not gonna take a look at that. We're gonna keep it here on the blending options, and I'm gonna go down here at this two sliders here. I'm gonna concentrate on the slider on the top, because what that does is, this slider here on the black section, the more I move it to the right, the more the dark tones are gonna blend with what's behind the image. So if I move this here, you're gonna see that the dark tones are being erased pretty much, and then you're gonna see what's behind it, right? And then if I do the same, but with the whites or the lights, you're gonna see that the light tones are gonna get erased, and then you're gonna see what's behind it. So that's why this image was a great example for this, because there's a good separation of those two elements that I wanted in my scene. So let's try this again. So what I want to do first is I want to kind of place this, not perfectly, but just in a way that might work. So I'm going to place this here just to have an idea of where this could go. Maybe here, like that. Now I'm pressing my numpad keys on my keyboard to set up my opacity on that layer. So for example, if I press number 2 on my keyboard, it brings it to 20%. If I press 8, it brings it to 80%, 0, 100%, and so on. So I press 5 just to have a little bit of visibility on the background and kind of place it just to have an idea. So back to 100, and now I'm gonna double click my layer. And now I don't want the sky, so I don't want the light values here on this picture. So I'm gonna play with this one. Now, if I zoom in, you're gonna see that it's very sharp, right? It's very sharp. Now, I could probably try something like this, for example, but if I press the Alt key on my keyboard and move this scroller here, you're gonna see that it divides in two here. Now, this is gonna help me get a gradient on the values that are gonna blend with the background. Now, I don't necessarily need it for this picture specifically, but for pictures that are a little bit more complicated, that's gonna be very, very helpful. Now, I'm not gonna worry about. You're gonna see that I have very light values here on these very tight corners and spots. I'm not worried about that because we're gonna fix that after it. What I do want is make sure that I have the information that I want for that structure to read like what it is. So I want these little details like this and all these angles of these structures intact for my scene, right? And I think that's pretty good. Now again, I'm not worried about the bottom here because I can erase that. I'm just gonna press OK. Now if I press OK and I need to make changes, I can go back and that's gonna stay the same. So I can always go back and change it. Now I do have a problem with all these white or light areas, right? Because it doesn't look right. Now if I were to darken this, if I were to do it like I would normally do it, like let's say I go to my curves and I want to darken my light by bringing this down, you're gonna see that my image changes because I still have active my blending options here. So I need to get rid of this and keep it like this so I can actually change my values on this structure here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna duplicate it just in case, just to have a backup, and then I can erase that backup later. So I'm gonna duplicate the layer so I have two of the same. I'm gonna create a new layer, just an empty layer, and I'm gonna merge these two. Now what that does is it's gonna keep my image the same, but if I go to the blending options, now this is reset. So now I can go to my curves, go down here. Now I can have a nicer value there, just like that. Now the scale for this is actually gonna be smaller here. I make this like this, so place it there. And now, to get rid of these areas that I don't want, I can just put a mask. And the same process that I did for the sand, I can do it for here. Just paint it in black here. And there we go. So now I have that detail there. And I can actually duplicate this. And actually, let's get rid of that to fix something here. I want to make sure that I don't have any extra content in there. So I can see there's a line here from the extra stuff that I don't want. I want to make sure that I paint that in black. It's completely out. Check that. Spots here. There we go. So now I can duplicate this and maybe use this on another section. Have something like this. Now again, I'm gonna do a lot of paint over after I do a little bit of photo bashing. So what I like to do is I like to do a little bit of photo bashing, or as much photo bashing as I can, and then do a lot of painting on top, and then do again another pass of photo bashing, and so on and so forth. So I'm constantly going back and forth. Now these two, for example, I can actually duplicate this again. I can make this bigger, and let's make it a little bit darker. Some of these areas here. Maybe I can use this for like a piece broke off, and actually I'm gonna be using this one over here. And I can actually break this off, have it situated there on the sand, something like that. And just put a little bit of shadow underneath it, color peek in there. And something like that. So that's the other technique, and I use that technique a lot because it helps. And again, you can combine all these different techniques and see what works. But now the other technique that I like to use a lot is the match color. Now the match color, let's say for example I have this image here, and let's just say for example I want to use this portion here. So let's do this portion here, and I'm gonna Control J on that layer to duplicate on a new layer that selection. But I want to use this as my windows. Let's put some windows here, and I'm gonna rotate this and make sure that I have the perspective correct. I should just do it on this side, make it a little bit smaller. This is another reason why I like to have some textures on my scene, because this helps me have some lines for my perspective on my buildings. And so let's say that's the placement for that right there. Now you can see that the colors here are not really matching. It looks horrible. So I go to Image, Adjustments, and Match Color. Now match color is gonna try to match your colors to a layer that you have in your scene. So the source is gonna be your file. My file name is shot2, and then here I have all my layers in here, and it's gonna try to match depending on the layer that you pick. And I usually just scroll down to every layer and see. I already know that layer 9 copy 5 it's working pretty well with just some adjustments, and these two are pretty much the same. This could work as well, layer 4. So I'm gonna pick the first one, layer 9 copy 5. Just gonna press OK. Now it's still not gonna be perfectly fine, but I can work with my curves here and see how can I match a little bit more of that feel there. I have these very light lines there. I can just put a mask on it Just erase those. There. That's it. And now again, this building is gonna be all broken up, and there's gonna be like holes and windows broken and all that stuff. So after this, I can come in and actually pick here and break up some of this spots here. So for example, it's gonna be all broken up here. The windows are broken. There could be like sand covering these spots here, like so. Coming down here, like so. So little by little, you start building up your scene with these different techniques and painting over them and all that. And I can of course duplicate that layer. Let's say I want some more windows here. Make sure my scale is fine. Like this. A little bit bigger. Now I already have my mask on it, so I can actually, this part of the building comes in an angle. So I don't want this part. Paint that with black so I don't see it. Then I have another window there. And let's say I want to have some windows here. I can duplicate this as well. And I just want a couple windows here going in this direction here. So I can actually use, let's use another part here. Let's use that. I'm going to merge this. So I only have this. I can delete this. And let's actually have here these windows. So now I'm gonna put a mask on it again, and I'm gonna get rid of that part that I don't want. There we go. Now I can do the same thing for this part right here. And see how that works. And let's get rid of this part that I don't want. Little by little, we start building your scenes. Another thing that you can do, for example, is, let's say I want to have this beam that you see here, maybe like on the bottom of these windows, just to make some separation. I can actually select this part. Since I already have it on my scene because of my texture, so select this part, and I press Control Shift C to copy everything that I have on that selection, and then Control V to paste. I can move this here, and let's get rid of this part. I can place this here in a way that could work. A little bit of that drop shadow underneath. There you go. So again, this really is gonna come alive once you start painting over things and making it more livable in your environment. And so yeah, so those are the main techniques that I normally use when I'm doing photo bashing or photo texturing. And I'm actually gonna start doing this now in the whole scene and start building it from the ground up. So I'm gonna work this a little bit, and I'll check back with you guys in a minute. Okay, so now you're gonna see here that once I do a little bit of the photo bashing and photo texturing techniques, um, I'm gonna have a more of a more concrete base on my textures and the mood of the piece. You're gonna start seeing here that I'm just gonna grab a couple of very simple brushes and I'm gonna be starting sketching out and painting some of the ideas that I have for this specific image. And I'm not using anything special or particular. I'm trying to be constant with my light direction and mood of the piece. And I had a couple ideas as I was working it about how can I destroy this place a little bit more and make it look like something happened in this place and make the player maybe wonder what happened in this place and, and explore this place a little bit more. So you're gonna see that I added like a very broken up building in the middle here, like if something maybe exploded a long time ago or something. I'm gonna be adding a little bit more details and stuff to make it a little bit more believable. Now, again, I'm not using anything special, just a very simple brush and sketching out my ideas on the top. And what I like to do is I like to do a little bit of this and then go back again and start applying a little bit more photo texturing or photo bashing techniques, and then paint again a little bit more, and then go back and forth with the different techniques, painting and photo bashing, and painting and photo bashing. So it's kind of like a back and forth thing that I do when I'm creating this type of images here. Um, but in terms of techniques, it's pretty much what I covered already. So I'm gonna let this run again, but I wanted to talk to you guys a bit about the painting section of this, so you guys have an idea of what I'm thinking and what exactly I'm doing here. All right, so let's finish this up, and I'll see you guys in a second. All right, guys, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I really hope that this gives you an idea on how to use your pictures and reference for the photo bashing technique or photo texturing technique. If you have any comments or questions about this week's episode, let me know in the comment section below so I can actually address it in future videos. Or if you would like to learn something in particular, let me know as well. And if you like the content, feel free to subscribe, hit the like button, share it with your friends. I'll see you guys on the next one.